Dr. Carmona, we're honored, Aegis, to have you join our summit. And my friend Rich, I am thrilled to be sitting down with you. So Rich and I go back a long way. Rich was a director on a board of one of my previous companies, Healthline, which became the largest health education company in the world. And it was wonderful to have Surgeon General guiding us. He was a phenomenal advisor to the company, to me, and has become a good friend since. So I'm going to give a bit of an intro. It would take all day to give Rich's full intro, and then we'll dive into some hopefully exciting questions. But so in 2012, Rich got a call from then President Obama. And President Obama asked him if he would run for the Senate seat that was being vacated by John Kyle in Arizona at the time. And Rich had always told me, he said, I have no interest whatsoever in running for elected office. And I said, well, so how did he get you to run? And he said, well, Obama did psyops on me. And I said, oh, wow, what did he do? And he said, that your country needs you again, and think of it as doing a second tour of duty, only this time you don't need to wear a uniform. Now, I don't know if that's psyops, but what I do know is Rich is incapable of turning down the call to service. And so I remember him coming to the Healthline board meeting and telling us he had to step down from the board to run for Senate, and I was super excited for him, really happy for our country, very, very sad for our company. And election day came around, and I remember texting Rich, and I figured hundreds of well-wishers are texting him. I didn't expect a response. Rich has been a first responder for 50 years. He responds, that's what he does. He responded immediately, and typical Rich, he's asking how I'm doing. He just ran a brutal, exhausting campaign. He's asking how I'm doing. Jeff Flake, ultimately the Republican candidate, won that election, but given only 9 months and really no organization on the ground or anything, Rich ran a really, really close campaign. He got more votes as a Democrat running for Senate in Arizona than anybody in history. 10 years earlier, Rich got a call from a president. This time it was a Republican president, George Bush, asked him to be the 17th Surgeon General of the United States. And he went through the confirmation. Senators were lauding his experience, his achievements, and he was confirmed 98-0. The only Surgeon General before or since that's been unanimously confirmed. I don't think anybody's even been close. Rich, he grew up knowing poverty. He grew up knowing homelessness. He experienced health disparities. All that shaped his aspirations, really understanding socioeconomics and understanding the importance of health and education and that whole mix. He dropped out of school. He enrolled in the Army, became Special Forces, became a highly decorated combat veteran. And he actually, 2 Purple Hearts, and Rich actually, in all humility, when you talk to him, tells me that a Purple Heart is given to a slow-moving soldier. So you talk to Rich about his opinions. He came back, and he then went on and got a GED, finished high school, went and got his medical degree at UCSF. Rich has been a nurse. He's been a doctor. He's been a highly decorated police officer. He's now a distinguished professor. He has always taken the call of duty, the call for duty. He has been a registered independent and yet responded to both a Republican and Democratic president. And he just does what's right, even when it's hard. When Rich was Surgeon General, he often said, I am the doctor for a nation, not the doctor for any particular political party. And he's proven that over and over again. And when I think of our theme, building at the speed of trust, I think of trust very simply as consistency between words and deeds. And there's really nobody I trust in public life more than Rich. So Rich, I'm absolutely thrilled to be sitting here with you.
I'll let you just keep talking. You don't need me. I really appreciate it. The whole issue of becoming Surgeon General, I never anticipated that. Really came out of the blue. And when I did get the nomination and then finally went through Senate confirmation, and relatively not known at that level, and the press asked me, they said, well, how did you manage to do this? And who did you know, and how did you become Surgeon General? I said, well, it was my first press conference. And I said, well, it probably was the most far-fetched thing in the federal government. And they said, well, what's that? I said, well, I was qualified. And The White House didn't appreciate that one, but I thought it was funny, and there was an element of truth to it, of truth to it as well. So I'm just wired. I love public service, and as you said, I've been a paramedic, a registered nurse, a police officer, a whole bunch of those things. But what they really have in common were leadership positions, public facing, and serving the public. And I've just enjoyed that my whole life, and fortunate enough later on to go back to school and, besides my doctorate, get a master's and learn about business and be on boards with you and others, and which has been another part of my life that is not only about the business, but learning how things actually get done in a public board. We've had that discussion.
Well, before we do that, let me hold
Yeah,
on.
go.
We're going to come back to that, but actually I wasn't going to ask you this until
Okay.
the wonderful session with Ariana, but I know you've told me your mother has been enormously influential in your life, and I wanted to start back with your character, and then we'll get into Surgeon General and healthcare, but maybe just start off a little bit about your experience and your mom, and even
Sure.
getting into I know she didn't even let you enlist. You had to wait till you were 18.
No, I was 17, yeah, and she said, no, I'm not going to sign the papers. And I said, Mom, I got to go. We don't have a job. I don't have any place to live. She said, no, this was 1967, 68. And she said, all you poor kids are getting sent over there and you're dying. She said, I don't want my son to die. So I signed up, but I couldn't leave until my 18th birthday because she wouldn't sign the papers. She forgave me. But yes, my parents were immigrants. I grew up in New York City, in Harlem, born on 110th Street. And I didn't know what poverty was. I mean, everybody on my block was poor, and nobody graduated from high school. Experienced homelessness a few times, know what it's like to go to bed hungry, wearing clothes at night because there's no heat in the building, competing with the roaches and mice in the house. But every one of those experiences really helped me better understand the things we call the social determinants of health today. Having lived them, they weren't theoretical constructs. So when I finally got to school, went to graduate school, and it really clicked. It was something that I had lived, and I think it made me a better person because irrespective of having worked for or with 4 different presidents, I always felt that calling to use my experiences to make it better for other people and relish the privilege of being able to serve the public in leadership positions as well.
Wonderful. So everybody has seminal moments in their life that shape them. You've had more than most. We've talked about a lot of them, but I thought maybe sharing the incident. I think you were an off-duty policeman when you came on, a situation that you thought required medical attention became something a little bit different.
Yeah, I was in law enforcement for quite some time, and then was out of it, and then came back in as a medical director after I was a physician. But then I ended up running the SWAT team because that was my background in special operations. And I was in an unmarked police car. I was driving to a meeting, and in fact, the next day we were at a national conference of special operations people, and the course I was going to be teaching or addressing was unanticipated high-risk encounters. And I was driving in an unmarked car, went through an intersection. I saw a bad car accident, saw people on the street bleeding. So I stopped. I put it's a light bar is inside the car, not outside. And I called in and identified who I was and went through the crowd and tried to administer first aid. And I asked communications to send traffic people, send the supervisor, send ambulances, et cetera. All of a sudden, when I identified myself as a police officer, people started running up to me and screaming, "He's got a gun, he's got a gun." And I didn't know what they were talking about. And I was in short pants and a polo shirt and running shoes. And so, make a long story short, I triaged quickly with anybody, made sure everybody had an airway. There was nobody hypotensive, but there were a lot of bruised people there. 3-car accident. And they kept pointing to a car, which was about 15 yards away from me. And they said, "He's got a gun, he tried to kill us." And the lady I thought that bumped her head in the car, it turns out, I found out later, when she got out of the car to exchange licenses with the other car, the guy hit her in the head with a gun and then tried to carjack her. But she was smart and threw the keys, so he got back in his car. I didn't see any of that. All I saw was injured people. Something told me, go back to the car, get your radio, and take your sidearm with you. And so I did. And I identified myself to the public because in Arizona, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, everybody has a gun. And so me in the street with civilian clothes with a gun is a target of opportunity for somebody else. So I identified myself with flat badge and said, who I am. And I've called for help, and then I called to the car, and I said, if you're in the car, come out. Completely black windows, I couldn't see. After a couple of times of screaming and yelling and identified myself, I think they told me 14 times to make sure nobody made a mistake that I was a bad guy. He got out of the car. Now, I'm thinking like a doc, both as a cop, and I'm thinking he must be disoriented. He was in an accident. He doesn't understand me. But when I said, let me see your hands, his back was to me about 15 yards away, and he only showed me one hand. He did this, which I knew was in trouble then because he understood what I said. He turned around quickly. He had a weapon in his hand. It was a semi-automatic pistol. He pretended like he was going to put it down. He raised it quickly, fired, grazed my head, and we got in a gun battle in the middle of an intersection with busy traffic. It was almost like being in a movie. And he was a hell of a warrior. He didn't want to give up. He was hit 3 separate times with my rounds, and then he spun around. He finally went down. And it was, yes, truly a seminal moment, one where I stepped out of the car to render first aid to people who I thought were injured, and it turned out to be a horrific scene of a very deranged man who I found out later, I was told, he had just been released from prison. He went to his parents' house, he killed his father, took his father's guns. Then he was driving to his old girlfriend's house, allegedly, they told me, to kill her because she had testified against him before what put him in jail. And so the county attorney had come and said, come and look at the car. This is all a crime scene now. And he said, look inside. The whole front seat was filled with guns and ammunition. And he had told his previous, the newer girlfriend, that if any of those blank cops or somebody tries to stop me, I'm going to kill them all because I'm not going back to jail. So that's what I walked into just as a good Samaritan.
So staying on the theme, which is an amazing, amazing story of, doing the right thing even though it's hard. So now move to when you were Surgeon General. I know there are many times where you were asked to do things or asked not to do things that you didn't think were right, and you pushed back, which is a really difficult thing to do. Maybe give an example or two.
Well, you're obligated because you're in uniform as a flag officer, an admiral, and you're obligated to execute on lawful orders. But some of these were just kind of not well thought out, and so I guess there are many instances. But the thing that concerned me the most, and I didn't realize it till I got to that level, and how the politics had plagued our nation, and back then it's pretty benign compared to what it is today. But yet when people would talk to me as, well, you're the Republican Surgeon General. And I say, no, I'm the doctor of the nation. It has nothing to do with politics. And so you're kind of stuck in the middle, and the two parties are beating each other up, and you're really trying to be acting kind of like Aegis, bringing people together to solve problems rather than pointing out the differences. And so one that was really problematic, I remember I got called by the Special Olympics. They said, would you mind being our chair this year and open the meeting? I think it was going to be in Japan. And because I'm on active duty, I have to put in for orders to get permission to travel because I'm a uniformed officer of the United States. I said, well, I'd love to do that. Let's see. And I put in my paperwork, and it got canned. They said, no, you can't go. And there was each of the departments have White House liaisons that monitor what you do. And I met with the lady, and I said, what's the problem? She says, well, you realize that this is run by the Kennedy family. And I'll use the name only because it'll give you the idea. And I said, what does that have to do with this? This is about children with disabilities who are competing. She says, yeah, but you can't give those people the upper hand, and went through this whole discussion. And I was flabbergasted. And I called over to the folks that invited me from the group, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't go. I called Teddy Kennedy, and I said, I know your family's involved in this. And I said, I just want to let you know. And he actually was soothing me. He said, welcome to Washington. And I said, I really wanted to go. I'm sorry. Shortly thereafter, I got a call from, again, folks in the Kennedy family who said, we have something called Best Buddies. And Best Buddies is a program they do in Hyannis where they kind of close down Hyannis and they bring all the disabled kids in and they partner them with celebrities. And then there's lots of discussions, health and things like that, but really to inspire the kids. And it was at a time when I was just releasing a report on the health of the disabled where we recharacterized the disabled as not disabled, but abled in a different way. And it really resonated a lot. So this was a perfect opportunity for me to speak with kids who had been kind of sidelined because of their disability, but ride bikes with them and have a day outing and talk to them and inspire them and so on. So that was denied too. Can't go for the same reason. So I was smart by then. I said, okay, I understand. So I called my senior aide, who was assigned to me, a commander. I said, hey, Commander, I'm going to be taking off this coming weekend. I'm just going to take some time off. And so you can do what you want. He says, well, sir, that's funny. I'm also taking off this weekend. And I said, well, what are you doing? He says, I'm going with you. And I said, well, how do you know? He says, I know what you're thinking. I know how you think. So I just took leave. I went up there for the weekend, had a fantastic time with the kids. And I got some admonishment for it, but I said, I'm supposed to be the doctor of the nation, not the doctor of the Republican Party. I don't do things to enable either party. I do things for the purpose of being the doctor of the nation and the extraordinary privilege I have to affect the lives of all Americans and our allies, because I did a lot of traveling, World Health Organization, Pan American Organization, and I took that job very seriously. What a privilege that I'm the 17th person in the history of the United States to be able to carry the flag globally and locally. And I don't want anybody to see me as tied to a political party, but rather tied to the best science that advances health, safety, and security of our nation and our allies.
Well, let's go from that. So nothing gets done without character, trust, leadership, everything we're talking about. So now let's move to healthcare. So
yes.
We were talking about we need to move from a reactive sick care system to a proactive healthcare, well-being, wellness approach. And you and I have talked about this. So a baby born today, right,
yes,
in the U.S., theoretically could live 120 years.
Yes.
Life expectancy is closer to 80 if we're lucky.
Yes.
And so effectively, we Americans we could be living 50% longer. Thought of another way, we're forfeiting a third of our life the day that we're born. Baby's born today. So in your view, what are the biggest problems we're facing today from getting from where we are to that world? So moving from really taking care of people when they're sick to getting ahead of it, all the things we heard about well-being and wellness.
Well, a lot of things that Ariana brought up, I would say that we've gotten smarter, that we are not talking about lifespan anymore, we're talking about health span. And we want to have as much good time as we can. So theoretically, a baby born today to a healthy mom and dad in a safe, healthy environment that gets the loving and the nurturing and all of, and these are what we call today epigenetic inputs, okay? The things that express genes so that your genes can function better for you. So if all of those things are lined up perfectly, and you get the good education, you get the good nurturing, you get the loving, you get the good food, all epigenetic inputs, then you've optimized your gene expression, and notwithstanding somebody who has predisposition for a genetic disease, you should probably live to well over 100, 120 and be functional, because none of us want to physically outlive our minds. And so when I looked at that, when I was Surgeon General, I started saying, well, then really what's happening is from the day one when you're born, if you start looking at epigenetic inputs as dependent or independent variables, and using AI now that ties into that, then every day the child who's born in an adverse environment, maybe with a single parent, living in less than desirable way, high-risk community, can't recreate, can't get the foods they want, eating a lot of carbs because they're cheaper, and you go down the list, then you're losing a minute or two of life every day as you go through. And ultimately, that accumulates to a loss of maybe a third of your lifespan and health span because of that. The other side is, even if you make it to 80 years old, how about those quality years? How much is it costing society because you're saddled with chronic diseases, mostly from inflammation that is fueling those in some way or another? So it was just a different way that I started to look at it. And I think our nation is now facing that, and we're able to better deal with it. But it comes down to those social determinants of health that are, and again, when you politicize that, it's one party, saying, well, you want us to be socialists and just give everything to everybody on the other side. And really, this is not political. I mean, you can make the business case why we need to rescue these people from this problem, but not give them fish for life, but as the metaphor goes, teach them how to fish. Okay?
Right.
And
let me cut you off there only because
go ahead.
I want to get a bunch of...
Yeah, go ahead.
This is going way faster than I thought. let's turn to policy for a second.
Yes.
We'll do policy, technology, and then I want to get
You're the boss.
advice from you. So, make America healthy again. I think we can all agree on the first three letters. Make America healthy. We can debate again. And there are 128 initiatives, right, to get us from here to there. I don't want the commentary on that. What I wanted to ask you is, if you were back in office today, in some way, shape, or form, influencing healthcare, what would be the couple tenets of a Rich Carmona policy?
Sure. Well, first, when I saw that first come out, and I don't mind slogans, but when they're tied to politics, I think that's not the way to go. So I thought, well, I have a better slogan, and it came out. It was MANA, M-A-N-A, Make America Normal Again. Okay, because we're really gone off course, and I think, but notwithstanding the challenge with the politicization of these health ideas, I think first and foremost we have to be a nation that embraces prevention, and we're getting there. And I look at the U.S. Public Health Service, which I had the ability to command for the years I was Surgeon General. Can we use those better and more effectively? When we look at issues, for instance, when I was Surgeon General, I got called in a number of times because young men and women were not passing their PT test, they were failing, retention was dropping down. But when I actually looked at the variables contributing to that, you're sending kids into combat in multiple tours over multiple years, and they get tired, mental health problems, okay? People that have obesity and they can't pass their PT test. But I pulled back and I said, well, what's really going on here? And I came to the conclusion that we were not engaging the population, which is a lot what Ariana's spoken about and what you've spoken about here, and how to optimize health through all the ages. Are we providing the abilities for them to do that? And it's a challenge in the military. So once when I was in the White House at one of the meetings, and it was a national security meeting, and it dawned on me that obesity had become a national security problem because we were not able to recruit, we were not able to retain. And so when I started looking at all of the variables, then I thought, well, how do we change this? What type of training, education can we do to be able to address these issues, which are now national security issues? And it continues today. When you look at young men, yes, less young men and women want to serve in uniform. And the ones that do, a lot of times the failure rate is high. When they're in, they are trouble passing their PT test, which is a test that allows them to be deployed. So again, looking at all those variables, I started working on that idea that the public's health is inextricably tied to nation's ability to defend itself. Because if these young men and women are unable to serve, that's one thing. But the cost of the disease, all of the things that are preventable. So all of a sudden, I just saw we're missing the boat here, that if we don't have a healthy society, it's going to impact our national security. We can't get the people to serve us. And so I think that looking at it from a different lens was very helpful. And we started to look at public health in a different way as a tool. For instance, what I did a number of discussions with the Joint Chiefs and with the different senior leaders about using public health as soft power projection. So as a nation, we have all the bombs and the bullets and things, and they provide deterrence from people wanting to attack us. But on the other hand, what if we projected soft power and with our science and technology and the knowledge we have, go into those areas that are struggling and provide humanitarian assistance? PEPFAR was one that came onto me. USAID, things like that that have been discontinued now, which are going to be catastrophic because of the challenges with these populations that are dying of hunger, dying of preventable diseases. And what happens when populations are struggling? There's mass migrations, and we have wars, and we see it playing out now. So I think that some of the policies that have been implemented more recently now are going to have catastrophic consequences to us, both in national security and global security. And the trust of our nation is in question, and the trust of our allies, who I still talk to around the world, who are wondering, where are we? It's like we disappeared from the table of discussion. And
Let me put a period at the end of that.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yes.
Just because we're running out of
Yes.
time. I just want to end on.
Yes.
So for the people in this room, advice for people in public life and people in this room. We're very divided. You've been able to really unify when you were in office. And I know you're a big fan of, Lincoln's Cabinet of Rivals.
Yeah.
What piece of advice in 60 seconds would you give to people in this room so we can actually make decisions and move forward so we're not in this situation?
It's an easy answer. Look at what Aegis is doing, bringing people together. Look at the diversity in the room, in ethnicity, in gender, in competency, subject matter experts. Each of them have fiduciary responsibility to organizations they come. You don't have to breach your fiduciary responsibility, but we can come together as force multipliers to change the trajectory that the nation is on, to reduce the cost of care and regain trust in the people that we ostensibly serve, not only here, but our allies internationally, because we've had a history after World War II of really being the stabilizer of the world. And we've kind of pulled back from that now, and we see what's happening. So it's not just about health, it's about health as a lever, and it's about all those programs that we put in play in both Republican and Democratic administrations, like PEPFAR, USAID, and so on, that helped to stabilize the free world and really earned us the trust of the world as the purveyors of health, safety, and security for others.
Great. Rich, thank you so much.